Hebrew grammar.
Okay, page 93. No, she's asking a question about 93. I don't know why, but she is.
And so we belong on page.
But we belong on 86.
Thank you.
So, when do you know when to use the 8? So, on verse 24, same sentence structure.
Yeah.
And Abraham was so many years, and he was circumcised in the first
Right.
day.
Okay. So
No 8.
I understand the question. The answer is the text is the text. You don't have to decide use the 8, not use the 8. If 8 is there, it's there. If it's not there, it's not there. Okay? If we were writing it, or it was modern Hebrew, or people were writing it as opposed to God, it would be et. Okay?
So you always know when the direct
right.
object is.
Et is an untranslatable.
Indication of direct object.
Correct. But you are correct that in biblical Hebrew, it's not always there. Why?
Because you made a comment once that you said in Hebrew you can always tell what's the subject, what's the verb, and if you use the 8, and you can always tell where the direct object
Correct.
is.
Unless it's not there.
Unless it's not there, then you can't tell it.
Right.
Then you're back to like English, which becomes, but in the Hebrew, in this case, it's still in the right order. So, okay, that was my question.
All right.
And the word, what's the correct form for the word circumcised? Here's nimol and then hayim, bahimolo. So it's nimlamed, obviously. So what's the root? What's the 3-letter root? It's
an exception to the rule. It's a 2-letter root.
Oh, okay. So
Or it could be 3-letter, mem vav lamed. I think that's an argument among grammarians, whether it's simply mem lamed
or mem
vav lamed.
Okay, and then nimol, and then here's another. What I found was it. So, and on that very day, nimol Avraham v'Yishmael beno. Nimol versus nimolu.
It should be nimolu. Again, the text is the text. Okay, that's all. That's the only answer I can give.
Because
No, you're right, but it's
okay.
If it were not in the text, that way we would consider it ungrammatical.
You guys are very lucky down because I am a grammarian.
All right. So, Genesis 16 and 17, page 86. 86.
Okay.
Monim v'shesh. 86. Okay.
I gotta find the. Well, I guess they don't.
Yeah, use it. I mean, we don't have any more people here, so I made 4 copies. There are 3 people here, so you can even use 2 copies if you like. Okay. I had already a cookie.
Oh, Ashin Korosha.
Boy, was that a grammatical structure. I had already a
cookie. Okay.
It's Yoda.
Yalla, let's go. Okay, let's start. Still there, Stan? Okay. V'sarai eshet Avram lo yalda lo v'la shivcha mitzrit ushma Hagar. Now, Sarai, Abram's wife, had not born in Hagar. Okay, and interestingly enough, apropos of nothing, there's a new series on Netflix called The Romanovs. I don't know if anybody
I saw the ads for it.
Did you watch it?
No, not
The first episode. So each episode is self-contained. They're not connected to any others. The first episode, one of the protagonists is a young French Muslim woman of Moroccan origin, although she herself was born in France. Her name is Hajar.
Hagar.
And it is Hagar. And if she was Egyptian instead of Moroccan, it would be Hagar. And at one point, somebody else calls her Hagar, and she corrects them to Hajar, but it's the same same name.
That's very interesting because the gentleman who's been visiting with us on Shabbat, Harun, Harun.
Right.
I don't know if you know him.
Yes.
Yeah, Harun is Aaron. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Shivcha Mitzrit, an Egyptian handmade slave, whatever you want to call her. Bat Paro Haita. She was the daughter of Pharaoh. Shera'a nisim shena'asa l'sara amar mutav shetahei biti shivcha b'veit zeh v'lo gvira b'veit acher. So Pharaoh saw the miracles that were done on behalf of Sarah. He said, better that my daughter should be a slave in this household than a mistress in another household. Question. Here's my question. What question is Rashi trying to answer?
How did she get there?
I guess, right? I mean, yeah. How
did this happen?
How did she come to have an Egyptian slave woman, right? But is there anything more to it than that? I mean,
No.
if you were reading this, would you ask that question?
I would have asked it differently. I would have asked, how did the daughter of Pharaoh wind up a slave?
Yeah,
No, but we don't know that.
We don't know that.
We don't know that.
Is this
If we didn't have Rashi, the
oh,
text is not the
I got it.
the Torah is not telling us
I
that
got
she
it.
was Pharaoh's daughter. Rashi's telling
I
us
got
that
it.
Pharaoh's daughter.
So is this before or after they go down and pretend to be
No, they've come back up.
they've come back up, so they were in Egypt, so that
Right.
so that sort of follows how
Right.
she might have at least gotten there.
Right. And so those are the miracles, right? Those are the miracles that were wrought. Now, there's another version that I'm aware of this same account. Not that Pharaoh was so impressed with Sarah that he said, here, take my daughter, please. But
Rashi didn't know that.
he didn't know Henny Youngman, right? But that Hagar was compensation because Pharaoh took Sarah from Abraham, right? The miracle was
He didn't take
that
Sarah.
he took her, but he didn't have relations with her, right? Now, other things are going on here.
Well, also, if she were Pharaoh's daughter, I mean, certainly, and Sarah and Abraham are what, they're half siblings? Did I read that somewhere?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe if I were Abraham and you got this powerful Pharaoh and you got Pharaoh's daughter, you might want to raise Hagar up and kick Sarah somewhat to the curb.
Yeah, which he didn't do.
Right.
He didn't do. I mean, it also, I don't know. I'm honestly not sure what the agenda is here. I'm not sure.
What agenda you mean? Rashi's comment?
Rashi's agenda, of course, Rashi didn't invent this. It's from Genesis Rabbah. But in other words, the question, right? The question is why do we need to know this, and what does it add to our knowledge of the story? Right? I mean, yeah, sure. Who is she? Right, but we don't ask that about others. I mean, next week we're going to read about the Akedah, right? And they're going, and Abraham takes his son, a donkey, and 2 servants, right? Do we know who those 2 servants are? Do we care who those 2 servants are? Does anybody try to explain to us who they are, where they came from? No. Right? They're servants. People had servants. Big deal.
The fact that Hagar be the mother.
Okay, right. So maybe the agenda is to give Ishmael noble lineage. right? Maybe the agenda is Abraham wasn't just screwing around with anybody. It was the daughter of Pharaoh, right? It wasn't, wasn't screwing around with horse faith, right?
Yeah, but whatever.
This is what I came out of.
But he was,
I mean,
God, later, well, I guess we'll get ahead and getting ahead, but doesn't Sarah say, take Hagar?
For sure.
Well, isn't this, but when you say how does it add to the story, I'm going to talk about structure. This is a foreshadowing. The fact that Abraham when I said birth of another nation.
Right.
So that in essence, there's as a storyline, it's foreshadowing.
It's foreshadowing. Okay, that's fine. That's an absolutely legitimate answer. All right, let's go on to the next verse. Legitimate answer. All right, let's go on to the next verse. But Tomer Sarai el Avram, Sarai said to Avram, Hine na atzarani Hashem miledet. Behold, the Lord has restrained me, stopped me from bearing. Bo na el shivchati, go please unto my maidservant. Ulai ibane mimena, ulai ibane mimena. Maybe I will be built up from her. Vayishma Avram lekol Sarai. Abraham, I like this word hearkened. Because Shema doesn't mean just listen. And it's not really obey either. So hearken, I guess that's a
pay attention.
Yeah.
But
this one uses
what does it mean when it says, perhaps I will be built up?
Well, that's what Rashi is going to explain to us.
Okay.
Right?
Good, Rashi.
Ulai ibane mimena, perhaps I will be built up from her. This teaches us that whoever has no children is not built up but demolished.
Ah,
I don't get that.
You also don't have children. You
Right.
don't like that.
I clearly understand the anatomical reference. I don't understand.
No, that you're not.
But you have lots of children because you're taught.
Right. But you
Right?
you don't have
A future.
a future. There's right. There's
Okay.
no.
Okay.
You're
Okay.
right. You do. Or your genes have no future.
Right. Okay.
Right. I mean, we're in the same boat, right? But both of us have many children because our students are our children, right? But our genes are not built up. Right now, this is a homiletic point. It's a homiletic point. It's not. I mean, look, the halacha says, right, pru uruvu, be fruitful and multiply, right? But on the other hand, sometimes that doesn't happen.
And by the way, that's the first command to people.
Right. Right. I will be built up from her. Ebane mi mena b'zchut she'achnis sarati l'toch beiti. In the merit that I bring my rival into my house. Right? In other words, Sarai is saying, look, I know that I really do not want my husband to have relations with another woman in my house. But maybe God will reward me for doing this. Okay? Because what's the whole point? The point is
that Abraham should have children.
No, not just that Abraham should have children.
But it's going to be hers too.
Right, it's going to be hers. Right? That's the whole point. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense that I will be built up from her. No, you won't.
That's the part that I was confused
Right.
about. Right.
Right. In other words, at this point, it is. It's absolutely surrogacy.
Yeah.
It is absolutely surrogacy.
Yeah.
Right?
Unfortunately for
It's
Hagar.
just it's surrogacy instead of IVF. It's, as Sheldon calls it on the Big Bang Theory, coitus, right? but it's surrogacy,
Right, that's what it is.
right? It is
That's what I was
surrogacy.
confused
There's
with.
no. We do not anticipate an emotional connection between Avram and Hagar, and the product of this union will be legally and morally, we think at this point, Sarah and Abraham.
And so that gets back to like The Handmaid's Tale, if you've seen it.
Sort
I
of.
I
Sorta.
haven't actually. I mean,
Okay,
I'm familiar
or
with
if you've read it.
I'm familiar with the cultural phenomenon.
Okay, but the wife is actually there when the husband tries to get somebody else because they're going to take the kid.
Right.
So ergo the handmaid.
If you're talking from a literary point of view, I don't think anybody counted on the emotional attachment of Abraham to Ishmael and to Hagar. Remember how upset he is?
Well, okay, but look, I mean, the intention always was that Ishmael be Abraham's son.
But
No, the tension comes according to the story, and we're jumping ahead.
Right, next week.
Right? No, it's not even next week. It's the next couple of verses.
I'm not even looking at that. It's just
Right, because we know the story. Right? We know the story, right? Because we're going to read it next, and we read it on the first day of Rosh Hashanah every year, right? So, but the tension and the conflict comes really from the conflict between Sarah and Hagar, right? And that's where Abraham gets into difficulty, right? Because it's not so much that he's attached to Hagar. We don't know that. The text doesn't tell us that he's attached to Hagar.
No, but when you read
the text tells us that he's attached to Ishmael.
Ishmael, right? But you also, when you read a piece of literature, you tend to maybe different characters, but you tend to identify with the plot of one or more characters.
Sure.
And so, irrespective of his affection for Ishmael, he may have some kind of social conscience about having to ban Hagar, who's done a tremendous service for him.
Sure, absolutely. Okay. So listen to Sarah's voice, the Ruach HaKodesh Sheba, to the Holy Spirit, the divine spirit in her. Okay. Now, what's interesting is that twice God is going to tell Abraham
to
listen to Sarah, right? The first time when she says have relations with Hagar, and the second time when she says
kick them out,
right, expel them, right? Twice. So there's a little bit of foreshadowing here too, I think, right? Because they have opposite effects, right? Opposite effects.
Bring close to it.
Right. So Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her handmaid, at the end of 10 years of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, and she gave her to Abram, her husband, for a wife. So, this verse down, we have three Rashis on this verse. Page 2. But Tikach Sarai, Sarah took, Lakachta bidvarim, Ashrech shezachit lidabek beguf kadosh kazeh. She took her with words. You are fortunate that you have merited to cleave to a holy body such as this one, meaning Abraham, right? So that, according to Rashi, she wasn't forced, right? Hagar was not forced. She was maybe seduced, convinced, but
she wasn't raped.
She wasn't raped, exactly. Okay.
Here's the reason why 10 years.
Right. There's a reason why 10 years. Miketz 10 shanim. Moed hakavua leisha sheshahata 10 shanim v'lo yalda levala chayav lisa acheret. The end of 10 years. This is the allotted time for a woman who has lived 10 years with her husband and has not borne children to him when he is obligated to marry another. Okay. Why?
Why 10 years?
Well, why is he obligated to marry another? He still loves her. So what if they don't have kids?
No
Because
kids.
he's supposed to multiply.
Right. Exactly. Pru urvu.
As many stars in the heavens, whatever.
Right.
And I think it's very convenient. Is it really, you're a small country or a small group of people. Peru is really an important command.
Right.
Not when there's 7 billion of us anymore.
Right. But there's not 7 billion of
No,
us.
but
There's
what the
14 million of us.
Well, I'm saying us in the sense of the entire world. I mean,
Right. But this isn't
but-
directed
but-
to the
but it's
entire
this little,
world.
they're trying to, you need a core group.
Right. No, I mean, look, I mean, I will say this and try and say it briefly so as not to get bogged down. Okay. But, there is a constant message from the organized Jewish community: have more Jewish babies, have more Jewish babies, right? And there's starting to be a lot of pushback because it's misogynist and it's also
Expensive.
well, it's expensive, but it also it's anti-intermarriage, really. I mean, look, you had Jewish babies, but the whole complex of Jewish identity is much more confused and complicated than ever before, right? You have people who are halachically Jewish who don't consider themselves Jews, don't live Jewish lives. People who are not halachically Jewish who do consider themselves Jews, who do live Jewish lives. People who go around saying, I'm half Jewish and half Catholic, right? I'm whatever, right? And so this have Jewish babies message is misogynist, heteronormative, anti-intermarriage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a problematic message, right? On the other hand, right?
If we don't,
75 years after the Holocaust, there are still fewer Jews now than there were in 1939, right? And so, it becomes complicated, right? Okay. So now, chayav lisa acheret. He is obligated to marry another. What does it say and what does it not say?
I'm sorry. I say that one more time.
See,
All right.
he's obligated to marry, but
After 10 years,
I got that.
right, he's obligated to marry another.
yeah, but he's been married. I mean, he's been married well over 10 years.
Rakshnia, you're ahead of us.
Well,
You're ahead. We're gonna
It's good.
we're gonna answer that question.
Rabbi Reichik would say we're going to get there.
But we are gonna get there.
Okay.
And we're actually gonna get there
Okay.
because it's the very next Rashi.
Okay.
Okay.
Is the issue to marry another, but not necessarily Hagar?
No. This is what Rashi is making a normative halachic statement. He's not talking really just about Abraham. The question, let me finish. The question is, why 10 years? And the answer is because Abraham knew and followed the halacha, and the halacha says if your wife doesn't give you a child within 10 years, you have to marry another. I'm asking a very specific question. Have to marry another. What does it not say? Divorce her and marry another. That's the point.
Doesn't put her aside.
right? He doesn't. Now he may, but he's not obligated
Well, and
to.
they were allowed to have multiple wives.
They were allowed to have multiple wives, exactly. Right now this becomes.
Isn't that the justification that Mormons use?
I guess. I mean,
The biblical justification.
yeah, but well, for sure. Look, the Bible certainly allows polygamy. I mean, it allows a man to have more than one wife. There's no question about that, right? The question then becomes, I mean, how this interacts with civil law, right? In other words, because, and if you're not interested, I'll just go on. But polygamy is still allowed under halacha, okay? Except for,
Current government.
well, there's a couple of limiting factors. Limiting factor number one was about 1,000 years ago. There was the Cherem of Rabbeinu Gershom, which forbid polygamy for Ashkenazim. It was never accepted in the Sephardic world. All right. The second issue, of course, is Dina de Malchuta Dina. The law of the land is the law. Right. Having said that, there are cases, in other words, all right, in general, we are not allowed to do a marriage. We as rabbis are not allowed to perform a marriage when either of the couple has been previously married and the marriage has not been dissolved with again. Right now, question is, right? I mean, halacha works differently than civil law, right? You can't, for example, you cannot be divorced in absentia, right? So let's imagine a situation, right? Couple gets married. They get married fairly young. They're married for 4 or 5 years. They separate, never get a get, civilly divorced, wife disappears, right? It's 20 years later. The guy has fallen in love again, right? They come into my office. Oh, congratulations, right? Have either of you been married before? Oh, yes, I was married 25 years ago. We were married for 5 years. I haven't even heard from her in 20 years. Have no idea where she is. Did you give her a get? No. You have to give her a get.
Okay, I'll give her a get. Can't find her.
But you can't
find her,
do
right?
it in a-
Can't do it in and legitimately can't find her, right? I mean, how we would determine that, I don't know. But let's say, he hires a private detective and she cannot be found.
And now I'll prove him dead.
Right?
Saudi Arabia.
She cannot be found. All right, what do we do? I'll tell you what we do. I get in touch with the head, the chief baked in of the conservative movement, the Supreme Court of the conservative movement, and they will probably tell me, well, all right, they're civilly divorced, right? Because we don't allow, yes, they're civilly, go ahead. Why? Because in the worst case scenario, he now has 2 wives.
Which is allowed.
Which is allowed biblically.
Circumlocution.
Which is allowed biblically. If the situation was
were
reversed,
No,
couldn't do it. Right? Couldn't do it. But
Even when you talk about law of the land, after a certain amount of time, when it is impossible to find someone, it's presumed that they're dead.
correct.
And so under civil law, that would be acceptable.
Exactly. Obviously, if they're still married civilly, I can't marry them
Right.
religiously. And this is
This
an
is
issue. Well, no, this for sure not. But sometimes what happens, and it happens most commonly in, let's say, Florida, okay, is that you have, 2 senior citizens They're both widowed, and they're too traditional to simply live together, but they don't want to be legally married because it will affect pension or inheritance
taxes
or
yeah.
taxes or whatever.
Right.
And they come to the rabbi and they say, Rabbi, will you do a chuppah for us, but no marriage license, do not register it civilly. Cannot do it. Cannot do it. And this is a case where they are legally. Obviously, if they're still civilly married, then for sure not. Right? But if the husband is still halachically married but not civilly married, there are cases where you could do it because the result would be he has two wives. And that's allowed.
But two husbands ain't.
Right. Two husbands not.
And getting back now.
Okay.
Sort of backing up a little bit. You know, Sarah, Abraham listens to Sarah when she says, you know, have it, you know, go have relations, have a kid. And then he says, kick them out. You know, it's so much for the husband being the absolute Lord and Master, which, you know, so many fundamentalists say.
Well, yeah, but notice, I mean, it's interesting, and I made this comment on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. I think this year, if not this year, then 1 year. We read, God said to Abraham, whatever your wife tells you to do,
Yes.
do. And I said, this is a specific commandment given to a specific person in a specific context. It is not a general rule. Right?
I'm sure Kelly had plenty to say about that.
Right, but it's not, well, it was Rosh Hashanah. She wasn't here. She was still recovering from her knee
told her.
surgery. Oh, okay. All right, let's go on.
4 is very interesting.
We got to finish 3 yet. Okay. Of Abraham's dwelling, you raised this issue, right? It says end of 10 years, but they've been married a heck of a lot longer than 10 years. The time they dwelled outside the land does not count because it was not yet said to him, I will make you into a great nation. Okay? This promise would not be fulfilled until he would come to the land of Israel.
Oh.
Right? So, yes, they were married for longer than 10 years, but however long they were married before they came to Eretz Israel
That's like 40 years. Right?
doesn't count.
Aren't they in the desert 40 years?
No. That's
Moses.
the Moses guys.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, but it says until they came to. Oh, my God. Never mind. Okay. Yeah, I got the story. Okay.
Okay.
Now for
Verse 4.
jealousy.
He came to Hagar, and she conceived, and she saw that she was pregnant, and her mistress became unimportant in her eyes. Okay. He came to Hagar, and she conceived from the first union. Right?
Prince Harry and what's her face? After all those years, couldn't.
Okay. So in contrast to Sarah, first of all, any
Hagar
other reasons?
is fertile, and Sarah was not.
Okay. But why do we need to know this? Or why does Rashi think this is the case? Or why does God make it be the case?
Well, and then it gets, because in the next part,
Don't look at the next one.
Oh, I wasn't looking at that one. I was just looking at the English, the whole verse. But no, I wasn't looking at the Rashi part. I was just looking at the part of the Hebrew,
right?
The Torah.
But
that's the
from
next
the
part
first union is not in the text. It's Rashi. All right. I think that what this is telling us, or what Rashi wants us to think, is God forbid you should think that Abraham enjoyed it. Right? It was purely for the purpose of procreation, and therefore God made sure that it was one and done. And once it was one, it was done. Right? You should not think that, God forbid, Abraham enjoyed it. It's not why he did it.
Just stretch.
What?
Just stretch.
But you don't think it's a legitimate
Oh, yeah, I do.
reading of the Rashi?
I do.
Yeah. Okay. Now we get to, and her mistress became unimportant in her eyes. But Takel, she became light, is the literal reading of the Hebrew. Okay, light, kal. She said, this Sarai, her conduct in secret is not like her conduct in public. She shows herself as if she is a righteous woman, but she is not a righteous woman. For she did not merit to conceive all these years, whereas I have conceived from the first union.
But that's Hagar's, in my opinion, what am I trying to say? That she is full of herself. I mean, that's her opinion of her
Sure.
importance,
Yeah.
not necessarily true about Sarah's behavior.
Correct, obviously.
So it just goes to the narcissism that's shown, or the egotism that's shown in 4 when it says it's a rise of jealousy and self-importance.
It also, makes you think of the half Torah day on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, which is a poor old Uzi is trying to get pregnant and she can't, and the other wife laughs at her.
Right.
But I mean, that's basically what I'm saying. She wouldn't be laughing at her unless she was self-absorbed in her own importance.
I don't agree with that. I mean, that's the cultural assumption that pregnancy is a reward for righteous behavior.
Well, that's what.
Right.
That's.
I mean, it's not. I mean, Hagar didn't just invent this idea, right? I mean, she was wrong, but she got it from somewhere.
Well, she was Egyptian, not Jewish. So where would she get it from?
But
not from Halakha.
Well, it's not from halakha. It's not from halakha. It doesn't say you're punished for not for. Well, if you're infertile, it means you're a bad person. But it's a cultural belief. It's probably still a cultural belief, right? I mean, you don't know women who've been married for a long time and haven't been able to conceive, and they say, "Why is God punishing me?" Right? Why is God punishing
Sarah
me?
said the same thing in different words.
Right. Why is God punishing me? Right? So it's not unreasonable for Hagar to conclude, yeah, God is punishing Sarah. I'm at least as good as her, if not better. Right? So now we're going to skip ahead. I'm not giving you the Rashi on 11. 15 doesn't make any sense unless we look at 11. Okay? The angel of the Lord said to her, that is to say, he says to Sarai, right? We're skipping ahead, right? The angel of the Lord says to Sarai, behold, you will sorry, says to Hagar, sorry. The angel of the Lord said to her, behold, you will conceive and bear a son, and you shall name him Yishmael, for the Lord has heard your affliction. Okay, Yishmael means what?
Something of God. I don't know.
Yishma. Future Yishma. Shma means what? Hear. Yishma, he will hear. Yishmael means God will hear, or God hears. Okay? So you'll name him Yishmael. Let's look at the Hebrew. It's more obvious in the Hebrew. All right. The karat, first line on page 88 at the top. The karat shmo Yishmael, ki shama Adonai el onyech. Right now, there's the L and Yishma. You can see if you look at it, right? Yishma El. God will, right? Okay. So that's verse 11. Now 15. Hagar bore a son to Abraham, and Abram named his son, whom Hagar had born, Ishmael.
First it says the angel names him, and now.
Well,
but now
no, the angel doesn't name
Oh,
him.
the angel, I said to her.
Right. You shall name him Ishmael.
So
God
Hagar,
says to Hagar, you're going to have a son, name him Ishmael. Now, 15, Hagar bore a son to Abram, and Abram named his son, whom Hagar had born, Ishmael.
And this is, well, it's the same thing later, because you learn later when Isaac is born, Sarah names him Isaac, but before the last chapter that tells that the last of this of Lecha says that tells Abraham you're going to name the kid Isaac before Sarah does, which I had
Right.
picked up.
Not only before Sarah does, but before the whole reason that he's called Isaac happens. Right? He's called
You with
Yitzhak.
us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right? He's called Yitzhak because
That's
Sarah
Sarah
laughs. Well, Sarah hasn't even laughed yet. Now, of course, God knows. Right? But yes, you're right. I mean, these are the kinds of things that give rise to source criticism. Right? Now, I haven't looked enough at the text, right, to know exactly, right? But if you have two texts that seem not to completely fit together, right? And in one of them, God is called Adonai, and in another one, he's called El or Elohim. Probably different sources weave together, right? At least that's what.
Well, it's even more than that throughout. There's so many contradictions, like an eye for an eye and all that kind of stuff. And one, it's the same thing with what people are doing with the Quran. They're changing it in order to fit.
Right, but that's not.
I know.
I'm just talking about the
understand.
origin of the text. I'm not talking about interpretation or misinterpretation.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a question relevant to Ishmael's creation. And I don't mean to send you down a different road, but I will. If you look at the rest of those lines on the top of 88, and if Ishmael is supposed to be such a blessing.
Right. I don't want to go there.
Do you know where I'm going?
Well, I mean, this his hand against everyone, everyone's hand against him. We can't cover everything.
Okay.
All right. We just can't. There's too much to cover in a 60-minute class. And so I've selected stuff
Okay.
that interests me. Okay. I mean, you're welcome to
Talk to him on another Shabbat.
or
after
to follow it wherever you like. I mean, yes, it's deeply problematic.
Okay.
Right. And it's interesting because as we're going to see, Rashi also has nice things to say about Ishmael, right? So there's this. I mean, and it's the same thing. It's true of Esau as well. Okay, is that I think Ishmael and Esau get a bad rap.
You've said that many times.
Right? They do. They get a bad rap. Right? So now in verse 11, the angel tells Hagar, name him Ishmael. Call him Ishmael. Right? And in 15, Abraham names him Ishmael. Huh? Rashi says, Abraham had not heard the words of the angel. So Rashi is saying, so yeah, I noticed that too. Who said, and you shall name him Ishmael. But the Holy Spirit rested upon him, and he called him Ishmael. He didn't hear the words of the angel, but he knew. All right, he was a Navi. He was a prophet. He had Ruach HaKodesh. He had divine inspiration. Okay. Abraham was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram. Abram was 86 years old, etc. Why do we need to know that? Well, all right, we need to know A, because it's a fact, right? But B, was written in praise of Ishmael to let us know that he was 13 years old when he was circumcised. Not okay, because we're going to read
later
later.
that he was 13. Anyway.
Well, in the next verse, right? Abraham was 86 when Ishmael was born, and he was 99 when he and his whole household were circumcised. 99 minus 86 gives you 13. So Ishmael was 13 when he was circumcised,
And
right?
it actually says that specifically
Where?
on verse 24. Oh, yes, verse 25 explicitly says it. I know it because I'm reading it. And Ishmael was 13 when he was.
Okay.
Ishmael.
Right. Okay. So now how is that praise of Ishmael that he was circumcised at 13?
That he would be so accepting.
More.
Well, if I were a male and I were 13 and somebody was going to try to circumcise me, I wouldn't be doing it willingly.
Yeah, well, he got not only the 13-year-old son, he got his whole household.
I know,
No,
but
but
the
bingo,
question was
that's
relevant
exactly-
to Ishmael.
That's
the whole
exactly the point, right? Is that, look, I was circumcised when I was 8 days old, right? Nobody asked me. Nobody asked me. Look, I mean, this is why,
consultation.
this is the point that anti-circumcision activists raise.
This is the story of my family. My brother-in-law was converted and circumcised at age 30.
Right? But no,
Yeah.
but fine. He
But he
was
was
circumcised at age 30. That was his choice.
Right.
Right? When you're 8 days old,
No choice.
no choice. Right? So I don't believe it, but I can make a very strong human rights case against child circumcision. It's irreversible. Right? It's irreversible.
And you don't get a say in the matter.
And you don't get a say in the matter. How is that fair? Right? I mean, this is why, right? I mean, this is the whole, by analogy, this is the whole Anabaptist controversy in the Protestant Reformation, right? I mean, fine. You're a few days, a few weeks old, right? Your parents bring you to the priest, holy water. Big deal. What does it mean? Meaningless. You have to be old enough to
Consent.
accept Christ on your own, or it's not meaningful, right? And that's where it was a big deal in the Protestant Reformation, right? So similarly here, Ishmael's 13 years old, right? He could run away. He could put up a fight, right? He could go to CPS and have a guardian appointed and put in a restraining order, right? But he didn't, right? Whereas Isaac was 8 days old. Okay, and now I'm going to jump ahead because it's my class. I get to do what I want, and I find it interesting. Okay, because next week, I don't even know, to tell you the truth, whether we actually read the Akedah next week or not, because I don't know if it's in the first, second, or third.
Which portion of the parsha?
Which portion of the parsha it's in, right? But how does the Akedah begin? Vayihi achar hadvarim ha'ele. And it was after these dvarim.
Things.
Dvarim.
Words.
Dvarim. I'm going to just say dvarim because
There's no good translation.
Because to translate it already prejudices the case, right? Normally we say yes, after these things. Now, here's the question. What things? What things? Okay, so there is a midrash based precisely in this that reads Devarim not as things but words.
Okay, well, that was another word I used for Devarim.
Bingo. And it's an argument between Ishmael and Isaac over who loves God more. Okay, because Ishmael says, hey, buddy, I was 13 when I was circumcised. I could have objected, I could have resisted, but I did not. You, on the other hand, were 8 days old. You didn't have no choice in the matter. I obviously am willing to sacrifice for God more than you. And Isaac says, since we're talking about Rashi, au contraire, mon frère.
That I got.
If God asked me to, you just sacrificed your foreskin. If God asked me to sacrifice my entire being, I would do it without hesitation.
And then he does it.
Vayhi achar hadvarim ha'ele, after these words, God spoke to Abraham saying, Kach na et bincha, take your son.
And your only son, which
Right.
is in this.
Right. Okay. So it ties in, right? So that's the dvarim. The dvarim is the words. What words? The argument between Isaac and Ishmael. Okay. Now, what else does this do? Since we don't have Rashi class next week anyway, so we can. I mean, a lot of the midrashic tradition takes the onus, or let me put it a different way, makes Isaac a willing participant and not simply a victim. Right?
Right. I mean, because he was 33 when he went. He could have said, hey,
Right.
got ass, you got the ass, you got the wood, hey, you're missing something.
Okay. All right. So Abraham was 99 years old, and God appeared to Abraham, and he said to him, I am the Almighty God. Walk before me and be perfect. Okay? Walk before
me again. Oh, before it was just, well, now he's actually saying walk before me, whereas before it would be implied walk
Right.
before me.
Right.
Wasn't there some wording that you made an issue or raised an issue
Last week,
with Noah?
between Noah and Abraham. Noah walked with God, and God says to Abraham twice, walk before me. Right?
You think I don't listen?
No, I know you. Believe me, I know you listen. Right? Because sometimes you tell me things that I've said, and I say, I said that, but I must have. If you tell me I said it, I must have.
Oh boy. Okay.
No, I know you listen.
Okay.
The question is whether I pay attention to what I'm saying, not whether you pay attention to what I'm saying. All right, I'm not gonna read the whole thing because it's 8:53. But look at the top of page 4. Be perfect.
Yeah, I was gonna say be perfect.
Okay. So let's look.
Wait,
1, 2, 3,
What
4.
was it? Walk before me and be perfect.
Yeah, it says
Okay.
walk before. I mean, perfect. And that's I'd pick on that one.
No, what I'm
whatever they
saying
do,
is
Rashi.
what came was the flip side was walk before me and be perfect.
But let's look at what be perfect. Okay, we'll go down before me. According to its midrashic interpretation, you see where I am?
No.
Go down 1, 2, 3,
About
4,
5 lines.
5. The third word of the 5th line.
Walk before me refers.
Yeah, according to.
Okay.
According to its midrashic interpretation, got it?
Mhm.
Walk before me refers to the commandment of circumcision. And thereby you will be perfect, for as long as the foreskin is upon you, I consider you imperfect. All right, and this is a sort of midrashic or homiletic explanation for circumcision. Okay, is that precisely the male human is not born perfect. God leaves a little bit undone, and we got to finish the work. Okay, it's like men come out of the womb not fully baked. Okay, and we got to finish. And it's interesting, but this is a reaction to the Hellenistic polemic against circumcision. right? And you see it, like, for example, and I highly recommend it. And now that we have Amazon Prime Video and whatever, remember the TV series 30 something?
Mhm.
There was an episode which I had, okay? Hope and Michael Hope has given birth to a son, Leo, named after Michael's father. And they're having this whole back and forth about should he have a bris, should he not have a bris, da 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 da. And just dealing with the intermarriage stuff for a minute. Hope said, who's the non-Jewish partner, says the greatest thing to my mind ever said in any drama about intermarriage. She says, "You keep telling me that you want our children to be Jewish, and I'm fine with that. My problem is I don't think that you're sure that you want to be Jewish."
The husband.
Yeah. So convince me that you want to be Jewish, and then our kids can be Jewish. But our kids are not going to be Jewish unless you're Jewish. Which, it was blowing me away even as I would think about it 30 years later. But one of the things that Hope has a problem with circumcision. She says, this kid comes out of the womb perfect, and then we do this unnecessary surgery, and then there's bagels and fish, right? And the Greeks, the Hellenistic Greeks, said exactly that. Circumcision is mutilation. The human body is perfect.
That's right.
The human body is
Statuary,
perfect, right?
David.
Platonic form of the human being, right? The human being is perfect, and then you Jews mutilate it, right? And so the sages say, no, the human being is not perfect. Now, again, this is all male-oriented and so on and so forth, and I just acknowledge it and move on, right? Because that's not, but the point, right? The point is that the human male, according to the sages, is not born perfect. Circumcision is the completion of the perfection of the human body. Again, you can buy it or not, but that's the argument. So walk before me and be perfect means be circumcised. And in that sense, I mean, and this is like, this ties in to one of like my favorite homiletic points. And we'll wrap up with this because it's already late. But I don't know. I think it's, so therefore I'm going to say it's worth thinking about. Okay. But all right. We say, when we eat bread, we say hamotzi lechem min haaretz, right? When we drink wine, we say borei peri hagafen. Okay, let's forget the pri hagafen. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, right? Praised are you, God, who brings forth bread from the earth. God brings bread from the earth? No. God brings wheat from the earth, right? What makes it holy, right? Because we don't say hamotzi lechem min haaretz when we eat grains of wheat. Pri ha'adamah shakol, right? What makes it holy and therefore worthy of its own blessing is that it is a combined effort of divine and human hands. Okay, and actually, if you go to Catholic Mass, I mean, it's, what does the priest say? Right, take these like gifts. I don't know, remember exactly the words, but work of your creation and of human hands, right? Because they got it from us, right? But so that's exactly the point, that God is
Paired up with us.
paired
We
up,
team up with
right? We team up with us, and God purposely leaves a little bit unfinished so that we can finish it.
So what's the correlate with women? I'm not talking about what do we do as circumcision for women. I'm talking about if circumcision creates the purity or the bond between man and God? What's the correlate for
Right.
women?
So, all right. So if you want,
Childbirth?
no, if you want to be an apologist, right, you say, oh, it's unnecessary for women because they're already born perfect. That's why women don't have to daven, because they're more spiritual and men are animals and they need it, but women don't need it. Da, 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 da. I mean, and you could say that.
And people do, but
And people do. Or you could say, look, it's a tradition that was created by men. It is. I mean, look, this is a complicated topic, right? It is a created by.
and I know you don't need to go here, so you don't have to take anything with it. I'm going to share one thought. The sad irony of this is such a supreme both expectation of God and acquiescence of man, for lack of better words, which is supposed to be such a sacred, right, was one of the biggest sources of men being killed because of being identified by that from the Holocaust from the Nazis.
Sure. All right. Anything else?
I'm still here.
Hi, Stan.
Thank you.
Bye, Stan. Bye, Stan. Good night. Shabbat
Good night.
shalom.
I stay away.
What?
Shabbat shalom.
In the kitchen.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.